In an Africa marked by danger and scarcity, every day could be the last. Human groups fought not only against wild predators, but also among themselves in a land where failure was common and success exceptional. But on this occasion, something changed. A group managed to bring down a rhinoceros after a risky hunt. Several surround it as the animal exhales its last breath, the spears still embedded in its body. Soon they will dismember it. The meat will feed many for days. The organs and marrow, invaluable in nutrients, will be cherished. The bones will become tools, the skin a coat. This momentary victory was not the norm. Hunts failed, enemies lurked, and the environment was hostile. But for one night under the open sky, this community can share food, remember the feat, and stay alive. Homo erectus was a pioneer in many aspects. They adapted to new territories, made more complex tools, and showed deep social bonds. Far from being beast men, many cared for the sick and walked just like you and me. Their story did not end. It remains written in each of us. In 1891, on the island of Java, a Dutch physician named Eugene Dubois made a find that would mark a before and after in the study of our origins. While excavating in hope of finding evidence of the missing link between apes and humans, he discovered a tooth, a femur, and a skull. Although today these remains are recognized as Homo erectus, at the time they caused confusion. The skull had a larger brain capacity than a chimpanzee's. The femur showed a bipedal posture, but the whole still retained traits considered primitive. The theory of evolution was just beginning to take shape, and many did not know how to interpret this intermediate figure. Despite Darwin having proposed decades earlier that humans and apes shared a common ancestor, this fossil evidence was initially underestimated. Some scientists classified the remains as a type of extinct chimpanzee, and they were later given the name Pithecanthropus erectus due to their upright posture. Only over time was their true value recognized. Fortunately, Java man was not an isolated case. In 1921, in a cave near Beijing, China, 2 human fossil teeth were found. This sparked new interest in the academic world. Subsequent excavations in that region revealed more than 200 fossil remains belonging to at least 40 different individuals, including 5 nearly complete skulls. This group became known as Peking man. Although separated by thousands of kilometers, the fossils from Java and Beijing showed such similar characteristics that they were eventually classified as part of the same species, Homo erectus, a name they officially received in 1950. For a long time, the fact that these fossils were found in Asia led many to think that this continent could be the cradle of humanity. However, naturalists like Darwin had already noted a key detail. Our closest relatives, chimpanzees and gorillas, only live in Africa. And indeed, more recent discoveries have revealed that the oldest remains of Homo erectus are found in both Africa and Asia, with practically contemporary dates. In China, Homo erectus fossils have been dated to 2.1 million years old, and in South Africa, remains up to 2.4 million years old have been found. This coincidence has divided opinions among scientists. Some propose that Homo habilis, a more primitive species, migrated to Asia and evolved into Homo erectus there, who then returned to Africa. Others maintain that Homo erectus arose in Africa and expanded rapidly into Asia. There is even the possibility that both ideas are partly right, that more primitive forms left Africa, evolved in Asia, and some returned more developed. What is certain is that for a long time more ancient and more advanced forms of Homo erectus coexisted on the planet.
Although today, terms like advanced or primitive are avoided in evolution. In this context, it refers to how similar they are to modern humans. In that sense, specimens with larger brains and smaller jaws are usually considered more advanced. Homo erectus lived for nearly 2 million years, and during that time it showed remarkable variation. The average brain volume was approximately 950 cubic centimeters, but some individuals from the Middle Pleistocene reached up to 1,230 cubic centimeters. For comparison, the modern human brain has an average of 1,350 cubic centimeters. These differences reflect a species in constant adaptation, diverse in its forms but unified by its capabilities, walking upright, making tools, and possibly living in cooperative communities. The classification of these individuals has also been a source of debate. Unlike Homo sapiens, Neanderthals, or Denisovans, whose genetic differences are clear but who could still interbreed, Homo erectus presents so many internal similarities that it is often considered a single species with several subspecies. The dividing line between species and subspecies remains ambiguous in paleoanthropology, reflecting how complex that period in our evolution was. What is clear is that Homo erectus was not a simple bridge between the past and us. It was a true pioneer, the first to expand out of Africa, to use more elaborate tools, and possibly to care for the weaker members of its group. Its history is not limited to buried bones. It lives in each of us as a testament to the resistance, innovation, and connection that make us human. Although many imagine it as a coarse and primitive creature, Homo erectus had a surprisingly flatter and more human-like face compared to the hominids that preceded it. Its skull was low and elongated, with a very pronounced supraorbital ridge. For us, who barely have visible brow ridges, these prominences may seem strange or even grotesque, but perhaps we are asking the wrong question. Instead of asking why they had such marked brows, maybe we should question why we don't. One of the most accepted theories suggests that with the evolution of our social complexity, we needed more expressive faces. The mobility of the eyebrows facilitates non-verbal communication, subtle gestures, emotions, warnings. Thus, we lost that bony bumper in favor of a more dynamic face. Nevertheless, these protuberances did have a practical function. They offered some protection against direct impacts, and considering how violent the environment could be, and possibly their own disputes, that robustness was not a luxury, but a necessity. In addition to its strong skull, Homo erectus showed another evolutionary novelty, a protruding nose. Unlike other primates, this structure is believed to have helped conserve moisture during breathing in dry environments. However, there is another, more curious proposal. Psychologist Lucia Jacobs suggested that the protruding nose may have evolved to better capture the direction of odors, facilitating orientation during long migrations. Although the idea is interesting, it sounds unlikely given that humans are not exactly known for their sense of smell. Regarding the brain, Homo erectus had an average capacity of about 950 cubic centimeters, although there was much variability depending on the region. In Asia, for example, specimens had brains of approximately 1,000 cubic centimeters, while fossils like Homo erectus georgicus barely reached 600 cubic centimeters. In general, the ranges go from 546 to 1,251 cubic centimeters. This variation is greater than that of modern humans or chimpanzees, although less than that of gorillas. Despite these differences, Homo erectus was undoubtedly the most intelligent hominid of its time. Measuring its cognitive capacity through skulls is complicated, but a 1-year-old infant fossil indicates that this species did not have an extended childhood like ours, which suggests less brain development. Its prefrontal cortex was smaller and less complex, which would imply cognitive limitations compared to us. Still, they achieved remarkable feats in technology and survival. In the dental field, they also present unique traits. Homo erectus had the thinnest tooth enamel of all the Pleistocene hominids. Thinner enamel allows for better cutting of hard and fibrous foods, although it reduces resistance against wear. In addition, their jaws were exceptionally thick, much more so than any current ape or modern human, suggesting a very powerful bite.
However, it is not entirely clear in what context that force was applied. Interestingly, their premolars and molars have a higher frequency of pits, which indicates a diet with more brittle foods. Everything points to the fact that, with the help of tools, their mouth adapted to new ways of processing food, reducing the need for ultra-resistant structures like those of their ancestors. As for the body, Homo erectus was as diverse as we are. Some individuals were barely 1.46 meters tall, while others reached up to 1.85 meters. Weight also varied, ranging between 40 and 68 kilograms. An individual of 1.85 meters and only 68 kilograms may seem thin by our standards, but it must be remembered that their diet, physical activity, and environment were very different. They did not eat 3 times a day or do weight training. Their build was probably lean by necessity, not by choice. The differences in size between regions were probably due to climate, available nutrition, and mortality rates. An interesting point is that, unlike other primates, there is no conclusive evidence of great sexual dimorphism in Homo erectus. While in species like Australopithecus, males could be up to 50% larger than females, in Homo erectus, the differences seem much smaller, perhaps comparable to the 15% that exists today between men and women. If this is true, we would be looking at the first hominids to show this change, which could imply a significant shift in their social organization, possibly with more egalitarian roles or less focus on physical competition between males. Although the fossil record is still fragmentary, this possibility opens a fascinating window into the evolution of human behavior. The body of Homo erectus not only shared a face with us, its physical structure was also remarkably similar. The proportions of its limbs, according to fossil remains and footprints found in Kenya, indicate a locomotion very similar to that of modern humans. They walked and ran like us, and most surprisingly, their shoulder anatomy was so similar to ours that they could probably throw objects with great speed and precision, an ability that could have been vital for hunting, defense, or even long-distance communication. Another mystery that accompanies our origins is the moment when our ancestors lost most of their body hair.
Genetic studies suggest that around 1.2 million years ago, there was a strong activation in the melanocortin-1 receptor, which suggests that hair loss exposed the skin to solar radiation and gave way to the appearance of dark skin as natural protection. This adaptation may have become more necessary during the Pleistocene, when changes in the Earth's tilt intensified solar radiation. Although it has been proposed that this hair loss occurred with Australopithecines, the truth is that they lived in high, cold areas where conserving body heat was crucial. In contrast, Homo erectus inhabited lower, warmer areas where a hairless body would have helped them release excess heat, probably through sweating, just as we do. Human skin, highly adaptable, changes shade according to the environment. In higher latitudes, light skin allows for the production of enough vitamin D, while in areas near the equator, dark skin protects against sun damage. This incredible biological versatility has been key to human expansion across the planet. In fact, the oldest example of a modern human disease in our lineage was detected in a Homo erectus fossil from Turkey, over 500,000 years old, which shows signs of tuberculous meningitis. This condition is often aggravated in dark-skinned people living in latitudes with little sunlight, which reinforces the theory that skin and the environment have always been in constant dialogue. All this suggests that Homo erectus not only ran like us, but also sweated and cooled down in the same way. In fact, their endurance was impressive. Some calculations suggest that if they were well trained, they could have run for up to 5 hours straight. This level of endurance would have allowed them to employ a unique hunting strategy, pursuing their prey until they collapsed from heat stroke. Today, the Bushmen of the Kalahari still practice this type of endurance hunting to catch antelopes like the kudu. But physical endurance was also used to get to the remains of dead animals before other predators, taking advantage of any feeding opportunity. This need to cover long distances may have driven changes not only in the body, but also in the diet. The expansion of the brain in Homo erectus is associated with a diet richer in calories, especially animal proteins. As their digestive system shrank, their diet depended more on already processed foods, perhaps even cooked ones, which facilitated brain development without increasing energy requirements. Not all groups of Homo erectus ate the same thing. Their diet was incredibly varied and depended on the environment. Some archaeological sites reveal a special taste for big game.
Elephants, rhinos, hippos, bovids, and wild boars. In the Levantine region of Asia, the disappearance of Homo erectus coincides with the local extinction of the straight-tusked elephant, suggesting that their subsistence depended heavily on these giant animals. It is believed that they stored meat by drying it, and there is evidence that they extracted and consumed bone marrow, a key energy source. In other places, however, their diet was much more plant-based. At a site in Israel, up to 55 different types of fruits, seeds, roots, and nuts consumed by a group of Homo erectus have been identified. They also cooked toxic or hard-to-digest plants to make them edible. They were not only hunters, they were true expert gatherers. In addition, they took advantage of aquatic resources. In the Turkana Basin in Kenya, remains of turtles, catfish, and crocodiles consumed by this species have been found, along with the usual hippos and bovids. It is likely that the large animals were scavenged, while the aquatic ones were caught alive.
Although their jaws were not prepared to chew extremely hard foods like those of their ancestors, their tools and the use of fire allowed them to greatly expand their menu. All this indicates that Homo erectus not only mastered its body, but also its environment. At some point in the remote past, perhaps gathered around a dim campfire at dusk, the first humans began to discover the power of transforming food with fire. This seemingly simple idea has generated intense debates in the scientific community. In 1999, British anthropologist Richard Wrangham proposed a provocative hypothesis that Homo erectus emerged from Homo habilis as a direct consequence of using fire for cooking about 2 million years ago. According to his theory, the act of cooking not only made food easier to digest and eliminated dangerous bacteria, but also allowed for more efficient nutrient absorption. This improvement in nutrition would have multiplied the amount of food available in the environment, allowing for the growth of human groups, encouraging more complex social relationships, and therefore demanding a larger and more functional brain. Wrangham formulated this theory to explain why brain size nearly doubled in just 500,000 years between Homo habilis and Homo erectus. However, although the logic is attractive, the fossil record does not fully support this timeline. So far, no conclusive evidence has been found that Homo erectus cooked their food since their appearance. The oldest signs of contact with fire date back 1.7 million years, but they are ambiguous. In places like Kubifora in East Africa, reddish sediments that reach temperatures above 400 degrees Celsius have been found from over 1.5 million years ago. Still, it cannot be stated with certainty that these high temperatures were caused by humans, as natural fires also leave similar traces. Despite this initial uncertainty, from 1.5 million years onwards, archaeological sites with possible traces of fire become more frequent. And by 1 million years ago, the controlled use of fire by hominids is accepted by most researchers. While we cannot prove that cooking was the direct cause of the emergence of Homo erectus, everything indicates that fire did profoundly transform the way our ancestors lived and ate. Perhaps it all began with an unexpected forest fire. Imagine a group of primitive hominids cautiously approaching the still hot smoke, only to discover dead animals cooked by the flames. Perhaps after tasting that soft, warm meat, something changed forever. It is possible that over time, searching for food among the remains of natural fires became a custom, and that they began to see fire not only as a threat, but as a source of life. For a long time, fire must have been a gift from nature, but at some point, although we do not know exactly when, Homo erectus learned to generate it by themselves, perhaps by persistently rubbing stones or wood. Some experts believe that Neanderthals already mastered this skill, so it is not unreasonable to think that certain late populations of Homo erectus, especially during the Pleistocene, also did. This mastery of fire would have revolutionized their way of life. But it was not the only thing. A crucial innovation is also attributed to them: the development of stone tools known as a coulion. These succeeded the more rudimentary Oldowan tools and represented a remarkable leap in complexity. Acheulean bifaces, pieces carved on both sides with a symmetrical shape, were like the Swiss Army knives of prehistory. They were used to cut meat, process plants, work wood, and even, perhaps, to kill animals. The first evidence of these tools comes from the West Turkana region in Kenya, with an age of 1.76 million years. Outside of Africa, Acheulean tools do not appear before 1 million years ago, which suggests a progressive diffusion of knowledge, either by migration or by cultural exchange. Although we have mentioned that Homo erectus hunted large animals, the question remains, how did they do it without stone points or projectiles? The first spears with sharp stone points appear only with Homo heidelbergensis about 500,000 years ago. Therefore, the oldest specimens of erectus from more than 1 million years ago probably hunted with wooden spears, heavy stones, and bifaces for stabbing. Wooden spears, although basic, are effective tools. Even chimpanzees use them. They are used for fishing, hunting amphibians, or even large animals if used in a group. Bringing down a prey the size of a rhinoceros would require coordination, strength, and above all, endurance. This is where the ability of Homo erectus to run long distances came into play, pursuing their prey until they collapsed from exhaustion and finally attacking with cutting tools. A fascinating find reinforces this idea. A spearhead made of bone with 3 barbs, dated to about 800,000 years old, is believed to have been created by Homo erectus and shows a surprising level of detail. Those barbs probably served to secure slippery fish, but could also have been useful for hunting other prey. Although we have no direct evidence of broadleaf-shaped bone points for big game hunting, making one of those would be even less complex than the artifact found. The problem is that most of these tools made with perishable materials do not survive the passage of time. But it is easy to imagine that they had different types of spears for different purposes. Light ones for small animals, barbed ones for fish, and heavier ones for big game. In addition to active hunting, scavenging and gathering remained fundamental parts of their diet. On the island of Java, Homo erectus also made tools from seashells, a little recognized example of creativity. At several lower Paleolithic sites in Africa and China, spherical stones have been found that some researchers think may have been part of bolas, a throwing tool that requires ropes. If this is true, it implies that they mastered cordage technologies, such as ropes or braided sinews. Another possibility is the use of clothing. Although we do not have direct material evidence, adaptation to different climates suggests that in some regions they must have protected themselves with skins or other materials. This ability would have been especially important in colder areas or during freezing nights. Homo erectus not only shaped stone, but also, little by little, began to shape their world. When did we start wearing clothes? Science cannot yet answer that with certainty, but there are fascinating clues. For example, head lice and body lice separated about 170,000 years ago. The curious thing is that body lice can only live on people who wear clothes. This suggests that modern humans were already dressing long before migrating out of Africa, even before facing cold climates. If this is so, it is possible that some groups of Homo erectus in Africa also used clothing. There are skin scrapers dating back 780,000 years. Although they are not direct proof of clothing, they do indicate that they manipulated skins, perhaps for other purposes. In addition to covering themselves, it seems that Homo erectus had some symbolic sensitivity. Although their art is scarce due to its antiquity, there are notable examples. The oldest is a shell engraved with geometric patterns from 546,000 years ago. Creating this type of symbol requires abstract thought related to modern cognition. Archaeologist Alexander Marshak compared lines engraved on an ox rib found in France with later rock art designs. Beads made from ostrich eggshells were also found in North Africa, among the first known decorative ornaments. Other objects are even more striking. The so-called Venus of Tauntaun and Barakat ram may have been altered by Homo erectus to look like human figures.
Although their basic shape was molded by natural erosion, marks that highlight eyes, hair, and limbs are observed. The Venus of Tantan even has traces of red pigments, which suggests it was painted. In Tanzania, pieces of ochre from 4 million years ago have been found. Its increasingly frequent use over time could have served to color objects, mark tools, or even to paint the body. But Homo erectus not only decorated, they also built. In 1962, a circle of volcanic stones was found in Olduvai Gorge. It is believed that they supported posts driven into the earth, perhaps to raise a structure with walls or a roof. In Europe, evidence of constructions has been reported during or after the Holstein interglacial period. In the Czech Republic, a 700,000-year-old site shows signs of structured occupation. There are also traces of cave occupation, such as wonderwork in South Africa, from 1.6 million years ago, although the regular use of caves was not common until about 600,000 years ago. Shelter seems to have been a basic need, especially during the glacial period. And there is still more: the possibility that Homo erectus ventured out to sea. Some theories suggest that their migrations, especially to islands in Southeast Asia, would have required crossing stretches of sea. Although there is no conclusive evidence, the mere possibility that they made rafts is a testament to a very advanced mind. The idea of a group of Homo erectus observing the horizon from a remote beach and deciding to explore the unknown connects us with something profoundly human. Can you imagine finding a human tool on an island that could never be reached by walking? That is precisely what has puzzled scientists. During the last glaciation, sea levels were much lower, which allowed the first hominids to access territories that are now surrounded by water. In many cases, they simply walked on what is now sea. But some islands like Flores or Luzon were never connected to the mainland, not even during the coldest periods. And yet, there they are, the footprints, stone tools, bones, and fossils that indicate that Homo erectus or their descendants were there. How did they get there? In Southeast Asia, the most famous case is that of the island of Flores, home of the tiny Homo floresiensis. Although it is still debated whether this species is really a direct descendant of Homo erectus, many researchers believe so. The important thing here is that Flores has been separated from the mainland for more than 1 million years. To get there, Homo erectus would have had to travel more than 24 kilometers between islands and more than 60 kilometers to the interior of Flores. Could they swim that far? In theory, modern expert swimmers can, but under controlled conditions. In contrast, open seas have currents, waves, predators, and in a tribe, not everyone is a strong adult. It is virtually impossible to imagine children or the elderly swimming those distances. This suggests something amazing, that Homo erectus may have developed basic maritime technology, perhaps a floating log, a reed raft, or even a primitive canoe.
Although we do not have physical remains of these boats because materials like wood and rope do not survive the passage of time well, their arrival on islands like Crete and Luzon and even possibly Gibraltar indicate that they possessed minimal nautical skills. In Crete, for example, Acheulean axes more than 100,000 years old have been found. We do not know if they were made by Neanderthals, Heidelbergensis, or Erectus, but any of them would have had to cross more than 90 kilometers of open sea. There is no way to justify that presence without some type of boat. The island of Luzon also offers a fascinating mystery. Homo luzonensis, dated between 771,000 and 631,000 years ago, could only have arrived there by crossing distances greater than 80 kilometers. That cannot be achieved by swimming. These migrations speak to us of planning, collaboration, and perhaps complex communication. This leads us to another key question. Did Homo erectus have a language? Although their brain was smaller than ours, their regions related to speech, Broca's area and Wernicke's area, were present and configured similarly to those of modern humans. These areas are essential for the production and comprehension of language, but having them does not guarantee the ability to speak. Some chimpanzees also have similar areas without it meaning they can form sentences. The hyoid bone, essential for articulating complex sounds, has also been found in Homo erectus fossils, such as one from 400,000 years ago in Italy.
However, it indicates that they did not have a vocal apparatus entirely similar to ours. This suggests that their form of communication was not a language like ours, but they could have used a proto-language, a system with sounds, gestures, and perhaps basic rules to coordinate actions. They did not speak like us, but they probably did share ideas, warnings, and emotions. This need for communication is also reflected in their possible social organization. In Kenya, a set of 97 fossilized human footprints from 1.5 million years ago shows a group of at least 20 individuals, almost all male. It could be a hunting party or a territorial patrol. This is very similar to what we see in modern hunter-gatherer societies. Men are in charge of big game hunting, while women gather plants and hunt smaller prey. This pattern suggests a sexual division of labor, something unique to humans, and very different from what occurs in other social mammals. Homo erectus probably lived in large groups, possibly with multiple males to defend themselves from savanna predators. In fact, sites with a high density of carnivores were generally avoided by this species, which shows a certain awareness of danger and a clear preference for settling in safer areas. And the most profound thing of all is that they not only organized themselves well, they also cared for one another. The most striking example is a skull found in Dmanisi from 1.77 million years ago. It belonged to a man about 40 years old. All but one of his teeth had fallen out before he died, and his gums had already resorbed. In a wild environment, that would be a death sentence. He could not chew hard meat or raw vegetables. He could only feed on marrow, brains, and soft vegetables. And yet he lived for several years like that. How? Because his group cared for him. That speaks of something more than survival. It speaks of empathy, of bonds, of humanity. This is not an isolated case.
The famous Turkana boy, 1.5 million years ago, had a juvenile herniated disc, a painful condition that limits movement. However, he survived until adolescence, which implies active help. In Spain, at the Cima de los Huesos site, the skull of a child with a severe brain malformation was found. He survived at least 5 years despite his obvious disability. Even if he was finally abandoned or sacrificed, he was cared for years. That kind of dedication is not common among animals. In chimpanzees, for example, there is affection for group members, but there is no evidence that they modify their behavior to help someone with a lasting disability. A toothless chimpanzee would simply die. But Homo erectus seems to have been different. They had the intelligence to understand the problem and the compassion to act. These gestures, these decisions, are what truly define what it means to be human. It is not just the fire, the tool, or the word. It is the ability to see the other, to share the burden of life, to offer help without expecting anything in return. That is why, when we find fossils like those from Dmanisi or Turkana, we are not just seeing ancient bones, we are seeing the first lights of the humanity that lives in each of us today. Everything has an end, even the most resilient species. Homo erectus did not disappear overnight, but over time their presence began to fade. As other, more modern human groups emerged, their niche shrank, as happened with the Neanderthals and Denisovans. It was not an abrupt extinction, but a process in which their genes were gradually diluted into new populations. Their legacy was not lost, it simply transformed. Many of their physical and cultural characteristics survive in us. It is estimated that Homo erectus inhabited the Earth for almost 2 million years. Their story came to an end only when other, more modern hominids began to expand and occupy the same territories. But their disappearance was not solely due to competition between species. The climate also played a fundamental role. In 2020, a study revealed that both Homo erectus and Homo heidelbergensis lost more than half of their ecological niches due to climate changes that began about 100,000 years ago. While some species managed to adapt, others simply couldn't keep up with a rapidly changing world. For a time, several human species coexisted.
The planet was full of diversity. Neanderthals, Denisovans, Erectus, and even giant apes like Gigantopithecus shared the stage. It was a strange, complex world, full of encounters that were not always peaceful. Some films, like Quest for Fire, have tried to imagine this prehistoric landscape. Tribes of modern humans crossing landscapes populated by distant relatives, some friendly, others clearly dangerous. Homo erectus managed to survive in Java until about 100,000 years ago. Perhaps some groups resisted a little longer, but there is no certainty. Over time, they disappeared from the fossil record. However, calling them disappeared is not entirely fair. Their footprints are in our genes, in our forms, in our history. They were human. Maybe they didn't speak like us or think the same, but they felt, hunted, cared, and created. What they did here on this same planet still has an echo today. Every step they took opened the path that we would follow.
And although their voices no longer resonate in the caves or on the plains, their story lives on, because we are part of it. The dust of their bones lies buried under layers of earth that time has almost forgotten. And yet, Homo erectus still walks with us, in our blood, in our ideas, in our hands that still create, still care, still dream. They did not speak like us. They did not write books or build cities, but they lit the fire that illuminated our path. They were the first to look at the horizon and wonder what lay beyond, the first to stay behind to care for the injured, the first to transform the world with intention. Their story is not just archaeology. It is the root of our history. Every step we take today, every word, every gesture carries with it echoes of those who walked before us. Their names may have been lost, but their existence was not in vain, because in every human gaze there is an ancient spark, a distant memory, a promise fulfilled.